what is.
It's still a mystery as to why it took them. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lauren Conlin, and with me, as always, is my favorite lawyer, Jarrett Ferrantino. Good morning, Jarrett.
Good morning, Lauren. Good morning, everyone. We got a lot of news today. We're really anxious and excited about just breaking down the developments in Kansas Moms, the God's Misfits case that you and I have been covering. And really, all weekend, I've been waiting to get to this.
Yeah. So on Friday, I received some new filings from the Texas County, Clark County's Las Vegas, so many cases. Texas County, Oklahoma, there's some new filings because new charges were added for 3 of the suspects in the case against Veronica Butler and Jilian Kelley. And this case is incredibly heartbreaking. And for me, it seems to get worse literally every single week. So the charges that were added for the 3 suspects, the 3 suspects are Tiffany Adams, Cole Twombly, and Tad Pullum. And Tad and Cole have 2 new charges added for them, while Tiffany has 4. These charges, we can go over Tiffany's first, and we can kind of explain, or Jarrett can explain what we believe is why these charges were added, what's going on behind closed doors, and what this means going forward. So I'm going to pull up the filing. Jarrett, can you see this, or you have it printed out?
I can, but I could see it. I could see it.
Okay. So, and for people in the chat, hello, thank you so much for joining us. Let's look at this. So the charges that were added, and Jarrett, I want to ask you something about this as well, but we've got number 6, 7, 8, and 9. That's unlawful removal of a dead body and unlawful desecration of a human corpse. And those are, there's 1 count per woman. And then there's also 2 counts of child neglect that have been added to this. So they go into some detail. Let me see, Jarrett, what I believe it's, there it is, the child neglect, what actually went down to cause these child neglect charges. And it's a little bit confusing. And Jarrett, your insight on this is pretty spot on, in my opinion. So if you want to just go into what you believe is going on, that would be great.
Well, first of all, go back to the first page if you can. So
Yes.
Anytime you see the word amended information, it means something has changed. So there is an indictment, a new indictment follows. So I'm asking the question, why are we seeing an amended information? What has changed from the original filing of these charges to these new charges? Obviously, this investigation has continued. And as we've covered it, certain scientific evidence has come out and witness evidence has come out and been developed. This particular charge that's been added to Tiffany Adams, let's start with the child neglect charge. Anyone who's been following this case, if we could go back to that now, Lauren, if we could go down to those 2 charges. If anybody has been following this case, we suspect very strongly the motivation behind these murders was the care, custody of Tiffany Adams' grandchildren. Her grandchildren were the subject and in the middle of a custody dispute between Veronica and Wrangler, and Tiffany has had custody of her grandchildren. And that was really the core of what we believe was the motivation of these murders. Now, Tiffany Adams is facing charges of neglecting those very grandchildren. Let's think about this. If I'm anticipating kind of reading what kind of a person Tiffany Adams is, the fact that she's being accused of neglecting these grandchildren right now is a huge slap in her face and is probably driving her crazy. Here's the allegation.
Right.
The allegation, think about how dark this is.
Mm-hmm.
The allegation is that Tiffany purchased is such a lawyer word, purchased the yellow straps that were wrapped around the freezer where Veronica and Jilian's bodies were buried and ultimately recovered. The claim in the amended information is that when Tiffany purchased these, the kids held them and the kids were helping her in shopping. Thereby, she is basically buying the tools to commit this crime and using the kids to carry them, to take them out to the car, to handle them. And that is an allegation of child neglect. First of all, think about how sinister and dark that is. These children in her care are being used to handle the very devices that are used to clamp down the freezer that held their mother's stabbed to death body buried like a dog in a hole. Now, that is some dark, dark stuff.
Yeah.
The neglect charge. So Lauren and I, we looked into the neglect charge in Oklahoma. Essentially, child neglect is typically starvation of a child, allowing a child to exist in certain conditions. You know it when you see it. This little bit of legal gymnastics to say this is neglect, it's clearly horrible. I'm not saying it's not horrible. To fit this into a neglect charge is basically saying you knew damn well, Tiffany, what you were going to do with those straps. And by the fact that you put them in the hands of these children, your grandchildren, they are going to be traumatized. Their health, their well-being will be traumatized in the future as a result. It's a tough claim. I think a jury will buy it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Otherwise, what are you going to do? Make the kids an accessory for assisting?
Right. Well, I mean, right. And they clearly had no idea. And just to elaborate on that, child neglect can also include, in the state of Oklahoma, failing to protect a child from illegal activity. So, Jarrett, that could also be considered, right, a part of illegal activity.
Yes,
because that's what they were planning to do.
If that would be an alternative position on it, which basically the illegal activity would be the conspiracy of the murder. They're somehow at or around this conspiracy, and Tiffany's purchasing the tools that were ultimately used. And again, we've talked about this. She purchased those straps. She purchased the burner phones. She purchased the stun guns like weeks before. So it's just, it adds to the level of, think about this. Think about her in that store, buying these straps, looking at these children, saying to herself, knowing full well these straps will be used to, at a minimum, hold the bodies of
her mother. Yeah, it's unspeakable. It's completely unspeakable. And I'm guessing here that there is security footage from this Tractor Supply Co. that they cite, and that's how they saw these very disturbing images of what is most likely a sweet little innocent child just skipping along the Tractor Supply Co. like holding a freaking ratchet strap that was going to contain their mother's corpse. I can't wrap
there
my
would
head
absolutely have to be. That footage will be obviously Exhibit A in support of those charges. That footage, I'm willing to bet, absolutely exists and clearly depicts this. So otherwise, I mean, you would have to be relying on a clerk who was interviewed months months later, remembering that the children were carrying what would have been a routine transaction in their mind. So I am sure when a jury sees this, it's often things like this, though, Lauren, I think it's worth noting. What looks like a pretty antiseptic situation, a woman with two children in a store making a purchase. There's nothing horrific about that. There's nothing disturbing about that. And then you learn these background details, and all of a sudden this totally innocuous exchange becomes probably one of the most terrifying exhibits in the case, and powerful exhibits. I would show that video just to show how callous Tiffany was, and that in support of that neglect charge. And think about what these children, as they move forward in their lives, when they realize they were part of that. I mean, it's just terrible.
Well, for their sake, let's say that they weren't a part of it. I mean, on paper, this is what I believe the state is trying to just nail.
Well, certainly not part of the conspiracy, but in handling those materials, it's just terrifying to think. I'm looking in the eyes of my grandmother, who's with me preparing to kill my mother. It's insane.
Yeah, you're right. And that is going to be really tough for them to swallow later on if it isn't already now. But let me ask you, you brought this up or you touched upon it vaguely. We don't know necessarily what Tiffany's quote unquote defense is going to be here throughout the trial. We have an idea that her defense is going to be that she wanted to protect these children because of what she believed was going on with Veronica or her family, allegedly. What does this do to her defense? What do these charges do to her possible defense, I guess?
Well, it looks like the DA is anticipating that's going to be her defense too. Like, she is this soul. She can't trust the government to protect them. She had to take the law into her own hands. So the DA essentially is checking her, saying, oh yeah, well, you neglected them by making them part of this. Like, you're such a protector of these children. You essentially made them part of this case by allowing them to handle those materials. You neglected the very children you claim to protect. It's really just another way to chip away at that defense. And again, she is very likely going to maintain or take that defense. She's probably proudly going to take that defense if I'm kind of anticipating what kind of a person Tiffany Adams is. But this goes a long way in beginning to chip away at her position. And clearly, she cannot take the law into her own hands. All that goes without saying. But this is a strategic charge that the DA it chose to bring, and it allows for the DA to really bring in some evidence of neglect that's going to go a long way in harming Tiffany's ability to say she's the sole protector of these kids. Look, I don't doubt she loved her grandkids. This is a power struggle. And really, people like Tiffany Adams will do anything to impose their will. That's what this is about. And this neglect charge must be driving her up a wall.
Yeah. And I don't know, maybe she did love them to a degree, but a lot of this, and without knowing Tiffany personally, but a lot of this does seem like a power play, and that she really, I don't know if she necessarily wholeheartedly loved them or she just wanted control because she always wanted to be in charge, wanted to be, the HBIC. But I did notice something, Jarrett, and I'm not sure if it means anything, but the counts for Paul and for Cora, when it comes to conspiracy, it reads conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, deliberate intent. But now for Tad, Cole, and Tiffany, it just says the word conspiracy. Does that matter? Does that mean anything has changed?
No, I think if you look at the charge itself.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at Tad's new information. So you're saying just when it lists them on the top. Okay. Yeah. When you go to the charge itself, it's still conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree. So that hasn't changed.
They just
the conspiracy, and we've seen this question be asked on some of our social media. It's like, okay, the allegation basically is that Tad killed Kelley, Paul killed Jilian, right?
No.
How are they
Tad
all
killed Jilian? Paul killed Veronica.
Right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So, but how does that make Cora or Tiffany guilty of murder in the first degree if that is ultimately the theory that is pursued by the DA? And that conspiracy charge is really what does it. It wraps everybody into the conspiracy. And if you're a co-conspirator, you are responsible for the acts of the entire conspiracy. So, which was the substantive acts that were done by Cole, Cora, Tiffany, Tad together, and Paul, really were substantive acts overt acts in support of ultimately the murder. So that's a mouthful, but they're all responsible for a first degree murder.
Okay. And then going back to the other added charges, and now these charges were added for Cole, Tiffany, and Tad. Let me just open that up here. So those charges were unlawful removal of a dead body, a felony, 2 counts of that, and then 2 counts of unlawful desecration of a human corpse, which, that is pretty twisted. So could you get into that?
Sure. The first thing I thought was you were the one who asked this question initially, is why that charge wasn't there. And I'm wondering if they watched the podcast because they've added this charge. But if they weren't watching that show, you ask yourself the question, what has changed? what do you know now that you didn't know then? Chances are those charges follow information that's being provided to the investigators. And if you look at this, who did not have those charges added to their informations? Cora and Paul. What have we assumed because of what's happened since over the past 2 weeks? Here's what's happened with Paul. He's been moved. He's been moved from his jail to another jail, away from the rest of the God's misfits. We have his waiver of a preliminary hearing, and we have a waiver of his speedy trial right. Now we have new charges that really flow from someone talking, okay? Someone providing additional information as to the specifics of how Jilian and Veronica's bodies were moved, put into that hole, mistreated, and these charges are added. Okay, if someone's talking, here's how you guess who's talking. Who did not have those charges added? Paul and Cora. So one of two things. It confirms our theory that Paul's talking.
Yeah.
Cora, why those charges may not have been added to her. Obviously, if our theory is true, she could be talking, but that would be speculative. Or she was not directly involved in the burial or interment of the body. So again, more likely than not, Paul Grice gave very specific details of what happened in the planning, preparation, execution of the kidnapping, murders, and burials. And in doing so, these charges followed. I'm willing to bet Cora's role was a little bit diminished at that time. Doesn't make her any less guilty of the underlying murder. It just means she may not have been part of the ultimate interment.
Yeah, if I had to speculate, it would be Tiffany being the mastermind and barking the orders, possibly Cora going to take care of her own child or whatever, wrap up any loose ends they needed. Paul Grice, he flipped. And then you've got Tad, who appears to be incredibly sick and twisted and would go and do whatever. And then you've got Cole, who owns the cattle company. He is a butcher essentially. And I'm not trying to be insensitive at all, but law enforcement obviously retrieved the bodies. They saw the state that the bodies were in. Now that we've seen this, I think that we can sadly use our imagination here, Jarrett, and try to figure out what happened. But that's where my head goes. And it's
and now law enforcement so you could have collectively charged them with all those charges initially. But at this point, they're fine-tuning the claims and they're really hook, line, and sinker in with Paul. The other thing is, Paul's information is lining up with what they're finding. If they're filing charges in support of what Paul's telling them, they're finding that what Paul's telling them is in line with the evidence they have already seen. For example, Paul, if he admits to killing, if Paul admits to killing Veronica, and he was injured on his pinky, and she was stabbed repeatedly, and his DNA is found in the hole on her clothes and in that area and his clothing, all of that lines up. It builds this credibility to what Paul Grice is telling you, okay? Because look, if Paul's in that witness chair, okay, which we're expecting him to be, although I think it's worth noting, at the end of these amended informations, there is a list of names. Okay. And these are
on the initial, that was on the initial affidavit as well.
Okay. But the amended information has those names again. Paul's name is not on that list.
Do they do that on purpose to protect him?
It's not there. I don't know why they did it. So it's not there yet. They will obviously, if he's going to testify, have to give his entire statement and reveal that he is. It's not there. So we are only it's just not there. And it's not on either. It's not on Tiffany's, Tad's, or Cole's amended information. So it's one of two things. It is an oversight or a deliberate act of the Commonwealth or the state not to reveal that Paul is a participating witness at this time. So
that's what I would think, Jarrett, right? Just to
come on. Yeah, absolutely. And this list is really, it's the initial list. It's going to change. You reserve the right as the state to call anybody identified in the discovery materials too. So
Okay.
these
Okay.
lists are ever changing, but it did not change yet. So we can't ignore that.
Well, so then what is the true definition legally of desecration of a corpse?
Well, I mean, desecration of a corpse can mean actual abuse where you're cutting bodies, destroying
Yeah.
bodies, moving a body. Like there's only certain ways you can move a dead body
And that's where
under the
my
law.
brain goes because of a chest freezer. It's not that big.
Right.
So
So
that's
there's under the
yeah.
law, you can only inter bodies a certain way. When you fail to do that, that means a proper burial, a proper cremation through a crematorium,
Yeah.
anything that could be viewed as disrespectful. And that may not be the term of law that's used, but if you apply that, you'd say, look, this is my loved one's remains. If
Yeah.
anything is done with those remains that I could believe is disrespectful, other than caring for them, preparing them for interment, unlawfully moving them inappropriately, causing any kind of damage, stealing from their person, harvesting organs unlawfully, anything of that
Yeah.
nature could be considered desecration. So the law often says, like, a famous line is like pornography. A judge said, I know it when I see it. Desecration is the same thing. It's this evolving definition where, as a human being, when you see something, you can say is desecration to a human body, that charge is pursued.
So what the state is saying here is that Tiffany, Tad, and Cole not only removed the bodies from where they were killed, the place of their death, they moved them, but they also desecrated them in order to bury them or in order to conceal, I guess.
Conceal them and tamper with evidence, which is also actually
Right.
specifically listed in the charge, which means by doing so, you hindered our investigation.
Right.
Dirt got mixed in, things of that nature. DNA evidence could have been compromised, although they did get DNA. But things of that nature, which is basically like you desecrated these bodies and you tampered with evidence of our investigation. So that's like a double whammy.
I guess I'm processing. I thought about this again all weekend. I thought about this. I knew what we were going to discuss. I knew, we didn't. And just so everyone knows, we haven't actually talked about this. Like we haven't talked offline and said, hey, this is what XYZ means. But I guess I'm processing that these people, if these allegations are true, from what we knew at the beginning, what we knew back in April to what we know now, this is one of the worst cases I've ever seen. I mean, this is so evil. This is so horrible, Jarrett. I mean, the desecration of a corpse, the families couldn't even get their loved one back. They couldn't even get Veronica and Jilian back and God, I hate to say it, one piece. It's unfathomable. And
if you look at this case, think about it. You have, which is essentially a cult. You have anti-government. You have beautiful moms. You have children stuck in the middle. You have a conspiracy of 5. You have these anti-government sentiments. You have this like Wild West mentality. I mean, this case has everything. And again, that makes it a complicated prosecution. But I'm looking at this. I mean, the case that's being built against the God's Misfits is very strong.
It is.
And they have a tremendous hill to climb if they believe they're going to be able to defend this, especially if Paul is now in the witness chair.
Yeah, I mean, and here's Margaret has a question. Is the prosecution required to reveal all of their evidence in the preliminary hearing in December? And thank you, trial junkies. I'm okay. I'm fine. It's just, yeah, it's disturbing. It's horrible. And yes, Sinead, they could face the death penalty. And the measurements of the freezer chest, Margaret, we don't know. I looked up some general freezer chests, I guess, a few months ago. And I mean, I think they were like, I don't remember, maybe 8 feet wide or something like that, or long, I think at the most. But yeah, who knows what they actually used. But Jarrett, yeah, is the state do they have to reveal all of their evidence in
No.
December?
No, all they have to do at
Okay.
that point is meet that limited burden. Basically, in everyday terms, it's like, this is the case to show the judge at the preliminary stage a crime has been committed, and these four are more likely than not the folks that committed it. That's the standard. It's called a prima facie case in Latin. I know Nancy Grace doesn't like to use Latin, nor do I, but basically they have to show enough evidence to meet that burden. Now, under the law, what you're required to show, here's where it gets a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
Let's just say you're going to present a particular witness at the preliminary hearing, and that person is old, or that person, I've had cases where I believe this person is going to be killed because of their testimony. And I lock them in at a preliminary hearing. And I say, in the event they're killed, I'm going to give the defense their entire prior criminal history of that witness. I'm going to give the defense their prior statements, so the defense has a full and fair opportunity to examine that witness. So in the event an elderly witness doesn't survive till trial, a person who lives the gang life is killed before trial, you can say that statement, that testimony under oath, is going to come in to the trial because you, Mr. Defendant, had a full and fair opportunity to cross-examine that witness. Now, it happens more than you would think. It happened almost in every one of my cases. It was crazy.
I'm wondering at this point if, and I know it's very early, but if the defense attorneys here for the 5 accused, maybe aside from Paul and Cora, at this point, would you say, Jarrett, that their main goal here would be to keep their clients alive and to not be face death? I mean,
well, that's always the folks that do this kind of work. And I'm not one of those prosecutors who hates or dumps on defense lawyers. I have a tremendous respect for defense lawyers. Some of my dearest friends are defense lawyers. So I would say a major part of their motivation is to protect the lives of those that the death penalty is being pursued against. Now, that doesn't mean they don't feel like they can meet this case head on the merits, but I can tell you, anybody engaged in this kind of work, it's certainly important to them to protect their clients' lives when all else is lost. If you're dead in the water on these cases.
But this is what I feel like. It's all that's what I'm thinking.
Well,
like, they have so much evidence. Like, but it's early.
I get it. And I think, so, I mean, to answer the question, yes, I think that that's obviously an important component, but we don't have the whole story. We have a lot, and this is a lot, and it looks like our theory of this case is holding true as more comes out. But again, I think that everybody listening or watching may look at this and say, who the hell would want to save the lives of Tiffany, Cole, Tad, or any of these folks, or Cora? But look, that's our system, and that's how people feel passionate about it. It's not something that I've done in my career thus far, but I have a respect for people that are able to do that.
Yeah, and it looks like each count for the removal of a dead body is up to 5 years. So that will be an extra 10 years. And then the each count of the desecration of a human corpse would be 7 years. So that would be an extra 14 years right there. So right there, they've just added on a possible extra sentence of 27 years for each. And that's not even, I don't even know what the child neglect is for Tiffany, but that's would just be for Tad and Cole. And
well, and those are the neglect charges are felonies, so it's no joke. But when these guys are looking at life, they're never getting.
So that would be for the neglect ones. Let me just pull that up.
Okay,
that's a year. So Tiffany will be looking at an extra 29 years, while the other two would be an extra 27 years. And Run for Justice says, do you think the Emmy report came back and that's the reason for the new charges? I don't know if you missed the beginning, but Jarrett was saying, I mean, the Emmy report was back pretty much immediately in April, but there was a gag order on that for 6 months. But Jarrett was saying that Paul Grice, we believe, we're speculating, we're not sure, but he possibly flipped, and he is the one that is explaining what happened, and it is matching the evidence that they already found. And sure, the medical examiner report as well. Jarrett, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think there's, it's a cocktail of what's developed since the arrest, but the driving force behind this would have to be the
Yeah.
witness in the chair saying who did what. And we're looking at it as Paul Grice.
Right, right. And I'm going through making sure that nothing else changed in these lawsuits. Nothing that you saw. It just kind of recapped what we already knew. Um, it does say with the murder in the first degree of deliberate intent. I don't know if I've ever read that out loud word for word, but it says murder in the degree or in the first degree deliberate intent, a felony by aiding and abetting in the commission of the deliberate and intentional taking away of the life of a human being on or about on the 30th day of March 2024, and then and there willfully, unlawfully, and feloniously without authority of law aid and abet in the death of Jilian Kelley, who was lured to the location of Highway 95 and Road L in Texas County, Oklahoma, and certain mortal wounds were inflicted, and Jilian Kelley did in fact die as a result of the wounds inflicted. I mean, and again, I don't know if that means anything, but does it mean that they actually died out by the car?
No, it sounds like that's a great question.
Yeah.
It sounds like they were killed at a spot, and here's what we can confirm based on the charge: they were killed at a spot, not necessarily there, and then moved to where they were buried, because they talk about the moving of the body. So that remains to be seen. We'd be totally speculating if we knew where. We do know there was a hammer, Veronica's glasses, and a significant amount of blood at the car scene where they were initially taken. But it would be totally, I don't know, it would be irresponsible. I think there was an intervening spot where they were killed and then transported to the Beasley farm.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the conspiracy to commit murder, and like for Tiffany's, for example, it says conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, deliberate intent, a felony by conspiring and agreeing with Paul Grice, Tad Cullum, Cora Twombly, and Cole Twombly to commit the crime of murder in the first degree, a felony on or about or between the 13th day of February. That was the first time with the anvil. And the 30th day of March 2024 by arranging and planning the deliberate, intentional, and unlawful taking away of the life of Veronica Butler and or Jilian Kelley. And the defendant and or co-conspirators did purchase burner phones, stun guns, ratchet straps, and travel to the area of Highway 95 and Road L, County of Texas, Oklahoma, in furtherance of the conspiracy. So
February 13th is the date. What we're looking at was the date. The date the burner phones were purchased, and likely the straps. Ironically, that's the same date.
The 13th was the anvil or something.
Yeah, but here's why the 13th is significant. She purchased the burner phones back then.
Oh, okay.
Stun guns back then. Ironically, February 13th is the Delphi, Indiana murder date too.
Oh, wow.
But no, I know it because it was approximately 5 weeks or 6 weeks before the murders that we've talked about. She was buying the burner phones were definitely bought then. So that date is a solid date, and it just goes to show you the length of time that they were taking serious steps at the murder. Doesn't mean they came up with it on the 13th. Clearly, they came up with it sometime before. She was buying the tools of the trade then. So clearly the plan was set forth or set in motion prior to the 13th, but it just goes to the level of intent. Intent is huge, and it's going to be a major component of the DA's presentation. Intent can be formed in the fraction of a second. Okay, you can pull out a gun and shoot somebody. That's enough for malicious intent to commit first-degree murder. When you have weeks and weeks of planning, that's a whole nother deal. I mean, it's just there's intent formed in a second, and then intent contemplated over a period of weeks, and nobody walking away from this thing. That just shows how dark this was.
Yeah, and reading that makes me believe that maybe they were all there at Road L and Highway 95. I mean, I feel like just thinking about this, why would they say that they were all, why would they cite the place where the women were taken if only Cole and Cora were the ones that distracted them? I guess, would that matter? And
yes, so that would be their contribution to that component. And then So read it to me again, how they're listed.
So it said, and this is the conspiracy, and this is what it says for Tad, Tiffany, and everybody who we thought was not at the place where the vehicles were located, or the vehicle, I'm sorry. But it says conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, a deliberate intent, a felony by conspiring and agreeing with Paul Grice, Tiffany Adams, and Cora Twombly and Cole Twombly to commit the murder in the first degree, a felony on or about in between the 13th day of February and the 30th day of March by arranging and planning the deliberate, intentional, and unlawful taking away of the life of Veronica Butler and or Jilian Kelley, and the defendant and or co-conspirators did purchase burner phones, stun guns, ratchet straps, and traveled to the area of Highway 95 and Road L, County of Texas, Oklahoma, in furtherance of the conspiracy.
Okay, so and that's on Tiffany's document?
That was on Tad, Tiffany's, and Cole's.
Okay, so here's the magic words there. And or. It doesn't mean they were all there. It just means that was part of the conspiracy. It means they could have been.
Right.
Or, so read that. So it says the defendant and or co-conspirators.
But yes, the defendant and or co-conspirators did purchase. Okay.
Right. Okay. So, but what I've been able to glean so far is no doubt Tiffany purchased those things. It's right in the affidavit.
Yeah. Right.
So.
Okay. I mean, I guess
all five to do that.
Just thinking about it, it's almost like, did they trust Cora and Cole to do that on their own? Because that seems like a pretty important part of their disgusting plan, right? I mean, because if Cole and Cora fudge that up, so I could possibly see somebody else being there. I mean, maybe not, but.
Well, clearly the kids were there. And the other thing is, it's
Wait,
about.
What do you mean the kids were there?
The kids were. Oh, you're talking about I'm talking about the buying of the stuff.
Yeah, no. I'm talking about where the vehicle was, where Cora and Cole distracted them.
They were the diversion, allegedly the diversion, which kicked off the vehicle going into the area where it was ultimately stopped. They were injured and removed, so they were there, and I'm willing to bet. Like Cora and Cole were the diversion. And then waiting at the spot would have been Tad, Paul, and likely Tiffany.
I guess I was just saying I wouldn't put it past somebody else to have been there too, because it seems like such an important part of kickstarting their their plan is like getting the women subdued or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I know that I saw something about a preliminary hearing being waived for this month for October. So there won't be a hearing in October.
Well, that wasn't a preliminary hearing. That was basically one of the status conferences. So status conference, oftentimes you'll have these things on the schedule to say this kind of keeps pressure on both sides to continue to exchange information. If there's nothing to tell the judge, both sides will alert the court and say, hey, judge, that October hearing before you is unnecessary. We are continuing to exchange discovery. We're headed toward the preliminary hearing in December. I think you'll see them at one of those status conference hearings probably in November. And that may be where you hear the confirmation that Paul's a witness, because he won't be at that. Or if he is, they reveal that.
So there will be at least one status conference hearing in November before the December.
Not necessarily, but I suspect there will be. There doesn't have to. I mean, typically you would never have status conferences before a prelim. It's because of the scope of this case that you're having that, and the size of the discovery and some of the issues that have transpired beforehand, which was whether or not these hearings were going to be held jointly, all that stuff. So that's why the judge at the higher court is already pretty intimately involved.
Yeah, right. And there's a question, how and when did the blood get in the truck driven by the Twombleys? That hasn't been revealed. There's nothing in any of these documents that say when that happened, but I think that we can just speculate that they harmed the women, and it was, it's interesting. I've thought about this, the transportation of their bodies, let's say to the Beasley property that was X many miles away, 8 miles away or whatever. They had to transport them somehow. So the fact that
we also know that truck was cleaned.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The fact
Twombleys know. I'm sorry, did I jump the gun on it? But the Twombleys know whatever was in there, they asked their child to clean the truck. So however that came to be, which I think is the question, either they were, Veronica or Jilian were placed in that vehicle at some point from point A to point B. Was there a point B in between the Beasley farm, or were their clothes bloodied in an assault? And did they place their clothes in that vehicle and cause some kind of evidence to be left in the vehicle? It's really hard to say. We won't know until Paul or someone testifies how that happens and what exactly and where. Like if the blood was found in the back of the truck, clearly then it would look like a body was moved or a person was injured and moved in that vehicle.
And I've kind of thought about this a little bit, but I don't know how much blood could have been in the truck for them to have a 16-year-old clean it and think that that would be okay. There are reports, and this is, this was part of the discovery motions, that there's a gooseneck white trailer. We don't know who that belongs to, but was the trailer hitched on the back of the truck? And were the women thrown in the trailer? And the blood in Cora and Cole's truck, was just on their clothes and got onto the seats. And that's why it wasn't so horrible to have their daughter clean it up. So these are things that I've been thinking about, but we don't actually know the answers to. So when Jarrett said we have a lot of information, but we don't nearly have all of it, I mean, that's true. What we're going to find out as this continues, I feel like it's just going to be even more heartbreaking in my opinion.
And these developments, I just think, are confirming a lot of what both we and the folks that have been paying attention kind of anticipate. I think, I'm looking at this and I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit for the rejects or misfits and say, Paul Grice is going to testify in this case, right? So what do we do with Paul Grice? How are they going to attack Paul Grice? Okay. Number one, they're going to say, Paul, you're the one who wanted to do this. You're the one who killed.
You did it.
You're the one who killed Veronica. You're the one who was injured and lied about it. But I also think that Paul Grice's sovereign citizenship claims that he made in another filing in court is going to rear its head too. They're going to say, well, wait a minute. Now I'm confused. You are not property of the government. You are not subject to the laws of the land. Now you're coming in here, raising your hand on the Bible, agreeing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You've entered into an agreement with the government, all of which you don't believe is legitimate. So
was that going to hurt him as a witness? This whole
I think
44-page document.
If you're doing your job as a defense lawyer, you're going to try to negate the credibility of Paul Grice as best you can. And the way to do that is say, Paul, this agreement means nothing to you. You don't believe the government has any authority over you or your children. This agreement is nothing more than a piece of paper. And it's going to be on Paul Grice to say why that's not the case, why he believes he's obligated to comply with the agreement. And again, these sovereign citizenship claims, I've had defendants make these claims. They're ever evolving and changing. Part of it is many of the sovereign citizenship claims are there's people that have issues with federal authority, but they respect state law. Maybe that's a distinction that Paul Grice is prepared to make. I don't know. And I don't know to what level. I don't know to what level. I mean, I read some of the manifesto. I don't know to what level Paul Grice reveres Oklahoma state law versus federal. That was a federal filing. But in any event, that's the manner in which they're going to try to chip away at Paul Grice's credibility. And as the prosecution, you're going to want to buttress his credibility and say everything he's saying plays out with the physical evidence we've seen so far, the communications between the parties, the timing, all of this. And I had a guy who lied for years and years and years in a huge case I did. I mean, I had 16 volumes of his statements, 15 of which were lies. He was an admitted liar. He was a co-conspirator. He was one of the killers. And in the end, the defense attorneys had all these volumes of his lies. But here's what he did. He came in and said, I lied to protect myself. And in the end, there was nothing left but the truth. He admitted to lying, but the way I rehabilitated him was he said this happened. Here's a receipt that backs that up. he said this happened. Here's a piece of the physical evidence that supports that, where the jury is not taking that leap of faith on the words solely of a liar in this case.
Yeah.
So I think that's the job of the state.
Yeah, and I think that the defense is most likely going to make a little case against Paul. He had some, animal cruelty, I don't know exactly what this was, but him and a bunch of friends, and I know briefly from reading this article that was really good, by a local journalist.
I read it. I read it too.
Yeah, it was really good. But I'm like, this is a way for them to sort of come down and desecrate his character a bit. But if he's going to stand up there on the stand and say, I did this, I killed Veronica. I mean, I feel like, all right, well, if he is going to admit that, that makes him incredibly credible. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. That's
regardless.
Look, okay. I'm here. So the animal cruelty charges won't come in. They will not be told in front of the jury because they're not charges of crime and falsity. They don't involve dishonesty. So they would not come in all likelihood. So that's the antelope murders that so which are pretty crazy. But you make a great point. The more involved Paul was and the more egregious his behavior was, he's going to say, look, if I'm a liar, I'm the one admitting I killed Veronica. I'm telling you the most horrible thing I ever did was kill this mother. I'm here to say I did it, and it's time for the truth, but these people were all part of it. Like, there's truth in the evil and the monster, the pure evil of what he's saying is truthful. Like, and that's, they say truth is beauty. It's like, well, truth can also be pretty brutal. And that is, to me, as a prosecutor, I would say, look, he's a big liar. He's the guy that owned what happened here. He's telling you, like, if I'm lying, I'd be like, hey, it was Tad that killed Veronica. I was outside the trailer at that time. That, to me, is the way to sell it. I would diminish my role if I was lying. So Paul's going to be a good witness, provided he's willing to acknowledge his role, accept the fact that, and handle the cross-examination well, and that he's somewhat articulate and able to tell this story in a compelling way. I think he's going to be fine.
Yeah, and just quickly, the last thing I thought about is something discussed among locals who have been nervous to talk about this case, and I totally understand. But they've said the meetings they held, the God's Misfits meetings, there was a lot more than 5 people there. Clearly, there are 5 suspects that are in jail, but a lot more than 5 God's Misfits in Keys, Oklahoma, or Guyman, whatever this area is. And do you think potentially that in the next couple of weeks, we could see more arrests, or within the next couple of months, because Paul is talking about what other people possibly did to aid and abet?
Well, certainly anything's possible. I think at this point, you may have already seen that because we're getting pretty far down the road in the prosecution of this conspiracy. Not impossible, particularly before the preliminary hearing. It's not impossible. Like this amending charges before the preliminary hearing, there's no prejudice to the defendants. Adding a co-conspirator is a new wrinkle. But I'm pretty sure at this point, those that are directly involved have been identified, and the theory of the prosecution is these 5. And that's me guessing. Okay. Yeah. But whether or not there's going to be other information or charges levied against members of that group, it's hard to say. I mean, who's to say that they discuss this just en masse with everybody in the group? I mean, I've seen people involved in organizations like this or gangs, and there are pockets of membership that are part of something and the other members know nothing about it. So that's entirely possible too. But
would you believe as a prosecutor, and I'm not trying to blame anybody or single anyone out, so I won't say the actual names, but would you believe that if Tiffany had the kids spend the night at her friend's house, who were also part of this God's Misfits group, and she was having the kids spend the night for a reason so she could carry out this elaborate double murder, kidnapping plan, would you believe that these people had no idea? They were just
Well,
in the.
I'm only saying it's possible. You can only go on what you know. You
But I'm
can't say,
asking you though, personally, like if
well,
this was you, would you be like,
he,
guys, like,
it's less likely that she didn't tell them, but the reality is she could have pulled that off without telling them. Who knows?
sure, of
So
course,
you just
right.
don't know. You just don't know. So she could have said, "Hey, I need to do something. I need you to take care of the kids for the night." And that may be something that's happened in the past. That could happen. I mean, it's hard to say, but they
It
do
is.
not have information, at least that's been revealed publicly, that it's anything other than that at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So,
Oh my
am I
gosh.
suspicious of it? Is there a little sus there? I don't know.
Yeah.
I
That's what
guess,
I
but my
mean.
God, there's already 5. How many more are we going to add to this?
Well, exactly. Where the charges could be much, much different and completely separate from this, but or maybe they're coming down the road when things come out during the trial that these people or whoever might
And are
be
those folks,
named.
let's just double check while we're here. I don't believe those folks are identified as witnesses.
Oh, of the way. Yeah, I think you're right.
We don't need to say their names, but they're not on the list.
No, they're not on the list. They're not.
But again, that list is not gospel. That list could be changed.
No. And that's
Although I
something
used to drop a line on the bottom of that list is like in Pennsylvania, I would say the state reserves the right to amend this up to including the time of trial. That's not here, but under the rules, they could do that.
Okay. And I see on there, it says, where is it? Texas County / Guyman firefighters. I can only imagine what they saw when most likely extricating the victims. Their testimony is probably going to be horrific. I can't imagine. Oh my gosh. But okay, well, hopefully this was helpful for me. I know that I
hope so. That's my goal, is to help you, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I hope this was helpful to anybody else following this case and like we've mentioned, what's happening up until the pretrial hearings. We'll try to go over everything and help everyone else understand what's going on, like Jarrett's helped me. So
just to telegraph, we have the preliminary hearing in December. Obviously, we're going to be very much in tune to that. Any pre-filings in the meantime. And then we're going to get into these pre-trial filings, which are going to really reveal a lot of information.
Right.
A lot more.
Jarrett, sorry, I meant to ask you, after the pre-trial hearing in December, how soon after that do you think they would set an actual trial date?
So they have a date where they bring everybody in, and they would likely waive arraignment and the reading of the charges at the big courthouse. So the judge could set a date for trial at that very hearing, but it's a BS date. That date's never the date.
Okay,
so they would say, like, we're going, let's say they have their hearing in December, it's bound over, they have a status conference or an arraignment in front of the judge early March, and the judge could say, I'm setting a trial date for August. That date is not likely the trial date. That date will.
Okay. And then when do you think that she will make this call about, or he, sorry, the call about trying them together, separate?
That's going to be meted out in that pre-trial litigation stuff. So that, there'll be a motion to sever the defendants. And that's what it's called. So there'll be a severance motion that will come, and then there will be reasons why set forth, more specific than what have been set forth to this point, because they're going to be able to say, we now have all the information. Cora's pointing the finger at Tad's blaming Tip, the things of that nature.
Well, do you think this is possible here, where Paul just doesn't get a trial? He just pleads guilty. He gets whatever
that's
he
likely.
gets.
That's what's going to happen.
Let's cross him off.
Paul's case won't be disposed of until all of these cases are done. So that's why he waived his speedy trial right.
But then could you see this happening? And I don't even know if this would be possible. So it's like Paul's out of the picture. Could you see Tiffany getting her own trial, Cora possibly pleading out somehow, and then maybe Cole and Tad being tried together? Same charges?
It's possible, but you would have to look at why. Like, they may say, like, it's hard to say. Like, it really is going to come down
Yeah.
to what the defenses are saying and why they're saying that needs to happen. But
Yeah.
I would say the likely scenario would be Tiffany and Tad, Cora and Cole get tried together.
Okay. You think so? Okay.
Yeah, only because that's a married couple. Their roles appear to be consistent with one another.
But he has
Tiffany
7 charges, she has 5. Does it matter?
No, I think that
Okay.
they're still being identified as being part of that diversion ultimately leads to and they both are. So I think that would be their primary overt act in support of the conspiracy.
Do you think Cora would waive the trial and just be like, I guess, would her defense attorney be like, Cora, let's be real, honey. There's no way that you are not going to serve any time.
They should all be saying that to them.
Yeah, right. I mean, I agree, but
again, I don't know how deep into whatever belief system that motivated this crime and their involvement these folks remain committed to. If they are committed to that belief system, the likelihood of them resolving isn't great, but it's not impossible. So I told you I would be going to Cora and saying, your daughter is a witness in this case. She's going to testify against you. Like, don't put her through this. Like, the gig is up. Let's make a deal here. And I don't even care at that point if she's willing to testify. I just be like, let's get one defendant off the playing field. Knock another one off. Like, that's so, because you got Paul, you got, but we'll see.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking, like, the fact that Tiffany, they'd want a trial here is obviously they're right. They can do that, but it's like, man, guys, this is not going to be good for you. If somebody offers you life without parole here, wouldn't you take it instead of the death penalty?
They will want the opportunity to get their position heard. You don't think Tiffany knew this day was coming? She didn't do this just to fall over and plead guilty. She did this for her day in court. She's going to show the world who she is.
I don't think she ever thought she was going to get caught. I literally think that's why. How dumb are you? I really think she didn't think she was going to get caught. Really.
I also think that in the event that she was prepared to plead her case.
Okay.
So I think I kind of know the type.
Yeah.
I've had people confess to murder and take trials. It happens.
Right. And
the toughest trials of my career, I can tell you that.
Well, and I was going to say, and just going back to the beginning, like what you said, these child neglect charges are really just a slap in the face for her, because most likely her defense was that she wanted to protect the children. So why are you neglecting them and exposing them allegedly to your illegal behavior and activity?
She wants her day in court to burn her detractors. She wants to tell the world exactly why she did this. That's my bet. And you're going to see it. So,
all right. Well, Jarrett, thank you again for breaking this down. Guys, we will continue on with this case, but join us on Wednesday night. We'll be live this week. We don't have any scheduling issues. We'll be live on Wednesday night with Cheryl McCullum. It's going to be a great show. If anything, comes out before Wednesday about this case, we'll jump on. But Wednesday night, it's going to be about the cold case that Cheryl helped solve, Melissa Wolfenbarger, which is amazing. And then some stuff on Tupac and Diddy. So, all right, everyone. Thanks for watching.
Happening. You're trying to figure out